Without further ado, I'm pleased to welcome Mr. Louis-Paul Tardif, Director of Multimodal Transportation Performance and Capacity Analysis for Transport Canada. Louis-Paul?
Saida, thank you very, very much. Yeah, as you did, I'd like to thank MITL, Dean, Mark, and yourself, Saida, and Justin, who really worked hard to get this this workshop back on track. We had that scheduled for last March. Because of COVID-19, we had to postpone, but we are resilient. We are like supply chains. We are resilient. So we're back in business. So anyways, this is a great project. This is part of a great project for us. We have, Transport Canada has spent many years now on looking at multimodal integration, and we are now using the supply chain visibility label as sort of a way forward. So on the next slide, you'll see, okay, so thank you very much. Mark, are you the one moving this? Yeah, thanks.
I'm trying to, Louis, yeah.
No, thank you very much, thanks. Sorry, I'm not as good as Saida there. So I think from our concept, this is a community base. This is a business approach. Our support is focusing on data sharing, data governance. And of course, you know, our purpose at the end is to make sure that the multimodal activities around the Port of Hamilton are more competitive, there are more productivity, and so we all gain from it. On the next slide, this is a kind of a, I don't want to bore you with that complexity of the data, but it has many parts to it. This will be done gradually, the integration, and we are very, very pleased that the Port of Hamilton is working in cooperation with McMaster in creating what we are hoping to be sort of a database system. And the next slide, I think Mark will explain. Yeah, as a concept, for instance, what we have, this is the type of data that we have access to. We have access to traffic data. The Ministry of Transportation of Ontario has the commercial vehicle survey data. The port has their own data. So we're looking at creating a very, as near real time as possible as we can, database that will be living, database that will be assisting the port, the city, and the region in being more into this multimodal supply chain concept. In terms of timeline, the next slide, in terms of timeline, so for us at Transport Canada, we see a feeding into all of this. As you may know, the government of Canada established 2 years ago a Canadian Centre on Transportation Data. That was a big criticism that came out of the review of the Canadian Transportation Act, that we need to have more transparency on our data, on our supply chain. So this fits into that concept. The end goal is to be able to produce a publicly released data set that goes into the Stats Canada Canadian Centre on Transportation Data. We are now the first phase. We are this data sharing. Partners have been established. The Hamilton Oshawa Port Authority, McMaster University through MITL, Transport Canada, the MTO is involved. Other partners, like we are obviously going to be looking at the Seaway Authority, other shippers, and so on. So the next stage will be, if you go to the next slide, please, Mark. So this is our timeline. We are now, we have a contract in place, or just about to be in place, with McMaster University, MITL, to produce this, this data this data structure and analytics, looking at all of the data pieces that we have to start building a complete data with public access. And by October 2020, we hope to have that ready and available. And that is going to become probably one of the pieces, Saida, at the September forum that we could present and talk about this transparency of data. So with that, I guess that's pretty much all I have to say, is that we totally, fully support this, this creation of this platform around the Hamilton Oshawa Port Authority. And we want to thank our partners, regional, municipal, and business partners into this. And I'll pass it on to Justin. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to all. First, I would like to start by thanking Saida Razavi and Louis-Paul Tardif for their opening remarks. Saida, thank you for providing the outline of the 2020 MITL TC virtual platform, which will be rolled out over the next 4 months, and also actually for laying out the itinerary of today's session. Louis-Paul, thanks for stating the goals of Transport Canada as they relate to our visibility project in the Greater Toronto Hamilton area, and also for identifying the department's timelines to implement these projects, which would of course allow us to share our transportation data more widely. To all the attendees, we are pleased that you have made time to attend this session specifically. You would find that it would consist of 3 different presentations, each aimed at sparking discussion on the topic of advancing supply chain and logistics in the Hamilton-Niagara region. Today, our first session, Supply Chain Oriented Insights from Recent Hamilton-Niagara Initiatives and Research. You will hear 4 terrific presenters, and you will hear more about them throughout the session as we go. In addition to our guest presenters, we also have participating today on this call a number of key stakeholders from various sectors, such as the transportation associations, corporations, and agencies, the academic institutions, all levels of government, the private sector, and several key MOLO group leaders. Now, before we start into the presentations, I would like to take a moment just to cover off a few housekeeping items. If you haven't already adjusted the settings on your device to participate on this call, please take the time to do so now. We ask that you keep yourself on mute during the presentations. You will find the mute button as a microphone icon in the lower left corner of your screen. Now, if you would like to pose questions, please do so by clicking on the chat button found midway along the bottom of your screen. When you click on the chat button, please direct your questions to our co-host, Dean Maynard. Dean will be collecting all the questions so we can then pose them to our presenters during the Q&A, which of course is scheduled for the end of the presentation. If we are not able to get to all of the questions during the Q&A, Dean will work with the presenters to provide the response to them, to your questions in the coming weeks. Also, you can contact Dean if you have any follow-up questions or comments after today's session. I would like to think that we are all friends, so please make yourself at home. Feel free to have a coffee. Washrooms are down the hall to your right. And once we have all of that sorted out, I'll certainly like to refer back to Saida's identification of the itinerary that was shown. And our first presenter would be Mark Ferguson of MITL,